Hello and welcome back to the question and answer session with Cutlet, Astral Gemini, and BoTalks. This is our question and answer session from the discussion on Star Citizen's MMOification, the process of Star Citizen transitioning into becoming an MMO. Really good discussion. If you wanted to hear that, it'll be above Astral Gemini's head. It's also, this is part 2 of the audio format. I do have this up, the entire VOD up for those who are interested. On YouTube, it'll remain up there for the for folks. It's usually unlisted, but it's usually under my playlist. So if you want to watch the whole thing through with all the breaks and everything else like that, but on podcast format on Spotify, it has I try to edit it a little bit so it's just kind of bumps up one another, so it's a little easier to listen to. So check that out if you get a chance to. All right, with that, these are all questions taken from chat specifically. I'll start with the first one, which is from Escape, who's kind of context, is very interested in rocket strikes, not missile strikes, but the Talon strike, but replacing it with rockets. Who asks, guesses why rockets are only available for 2 ships. Can't balance them if it's not broadly available. He's talking about dumbfire rockets. What do y'all think? Why do you think CIG has only done 2 rockets, like 2 ships?
Because they have enough issues with missiles.
What's that, Cutlet?
I was asking who answers.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Well, I think it's just overall they struggle with balancing. In general, we've been through multiple flight models. And now we're in a master mode, and we're still not there. I think a lot of players can agree.
Yeah.
They did some progress in overall PU combat and group fighting, but now solo PvP duels are really suffering from the decisions. They barely started scraping the rebalance of all the guns and components, as we've seen recently. Different guns and components are different. Actually, it hasn't been a thing for 2 years since they equalized everything, right? So I think it's just bringing in another variable that they have no idea of how to implement it, just to bring it in and just leave it broken. Then I don't think they want that. They have it definitely will come. The idea is there. The Vanguard Harbinger has the pods on the turret. The Mustang Delta, I think, has the pods, and that's about it. The idea is there. It's you gotta understand, there is nothing special in the rocket pods compared to any other gun, besides your own perception of it, that you think it is different. So rocket pods, they work simply like projectiles. They don't work as missiles. They don't really track. So it's just a different visual for almost the same logic, aside that they fly slower, which is just the projectile speed, and they create explosive AoE that deals damage. It's not a direct hit. When it hits, it creates an AoE sphere that everything that is in that sphere takes damage. That is also not something unique. CF whatever that gun C88 whatever it is does that, and they have always a lot of problems with it. One of the problems is they don't know how to deal with an AoE damage. The way the logic of the engine, how it works, everything that gets into the sphere of AoE damage gets damaged. That means if you hit a ship, every single part of that ship will separately take the same amount of damage. Every component, even if it's protected by the ship, if it is inside of that sphere, will take damage and will be disabled. There are a lot of issues, and before I think they can move to that, they have to implement a lot of stuff like armor, etc., etc., etc. So only after that they should start thinking on creating that. Besides that, it's just projectile speed, pip, because for the rockets we still have pips just for normal guns because it's a straightforward projectile.
It's a gun,
right?
Yeah, it's a gun with a rocket.
It's basically a gun that you perceive as a human being differently because CAG told you it's different, but in reality, it doesn't have a missile logic. So I think it's just a matter of priorities. When, why, for what reason, if we will not be even able to follow it up and it will be infinitely broken until we are able to invest time in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the best way of bringing it down. I was going to say something to the effect of it also needs to have a reason. And I don't think rockets, it's very difficult to hit a ship with a rocket because the speed upon which the rockets actually fire is so slow compared to the regular projectiles. And because of that, it becomes much harder to hit a moving target with it. And
100%.
And so rockets, in my mind, are going to end up being ground strafing usage. So, and you need to have bases that you can blow up with rockets.
Or people on the ground who actually do ground ops, which right now is only merely a role play thing. People would create artificial combat. It just doesn't happen in a natural environment. But I must say, strike actually with a shit ton of rockets sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with Escape.
Not gonna lie,
that the Shrike
would be cool.
The Shrike should be a rocket platform because that would be fun.
I agree. That would be cool.
All right, let's go with the next question, which is Gin and Tonic asks, and I'll start with you on this one, Astro Gemini. The problem with this episode is that Star Citizen is being turned into an MMO. When was Star Citizen not going to be an MMO?
At least I guess it depends on your perception, but I feel like Star Citizen was always kind of moving towards being an MMO, but I think this CitizenCon they really put the word down on the table and said, we will be an MMO. Here are the MMO-like features that we are implementing into the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, the reason why I called it the MMOification is because before this, Star Citizen didn't feel like an MMO, and even the plans didn't feel like an MMO. It felt like a survival game mixed with Freelancer, mixed with Wing Commander. It was a hodgepodge of different things. Even Chris didn't like to use the word MMO. He used life simulator or whatever. It was a multiplayer survival space simulator game because it was missing pretty much most of the things that make an MMO, which is a integrated social system and persistence between all players. And also things like MMO staples like dungeons and raids or gear and tiers and those sorts of things. The things you'd expect from an MMO where there's progression beyond just get money,
Actually, if you go back into the history of Star Citizen, because the question is when it wasn't supposed to be an MMO, it wasn't. If you look at the very old backing, it was just we will do Squadron 42 and we will do a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
But guys, you got to remember, we didn't have walking on planets.
Yeah.
We didn't have anything. We merely had the idea of that we would have something to do online with those spaceships. And that's it. And we only hoped. But the fact that we hoped doesn't mean it was a promise that it's going to be an MMO game, right? We hoped it would be an MMO game.
Remember, the first pitch for Star Citizen was the best damn space sim ever. BDSSE. That doesn't tell me MMO at all. Bo?
So the same friend that I pulled kicking and screaming into this game is the same one that told me about it in a time where I was able to join it back in 2019. So he described it as an MMO to me. And then when checking it out, everything talked about it being a simulation, a flight sim style game. So somewhere in the 2019, 2020, 2021 range is where I started picking up on people saying or directions towards it becoming an MMO, but like it was nowhere close to that. It wasn't in the plan, the actual plans or anywhere. It was just people talking about it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those gosh, what's the is it Mandela effect, where you look back on a thing and you're like, wasn't this always this differently? Way? I remember this differently. But I feel like this is the first time that they've really expressed, we are building an MMO. But I think based on the way that the game has been and the way that it's evolving, in the perception in our minds of what the game will eventually be, that is an MMO.
Yeah.
And we've just been saying, oh, when the game is done, it will be an MMO in our minds, because that's kind of how we as the players envision the game as a finished product being.
Yeah,
but this is the first time that they've really sat down and say, we are making an MMO. Here are the features that we're adding to make it an MMO.
Yeah, and I think this like uncertainty of will it be an MMO actually is one thing, was one of the motivating factors, like for people pledging so much money to the project. It's just like, take it, just make it happen. Like with every million, like make it happen. And we've finally grown from an online game with a certain amount of features for to the point where they're like, okay, this is a full-on like online MMO experience. I mean, it didn't happen. Like they said what they said at 1.0. Like the fact that Star Citizen is becoming a full-on MMO was obviously understandable for quite some years now. But we have to understand this project, like the idea of this project started in 2012. And back then, no, it was, there would be features in an online game, but like people just kept like money, and the studio growth and all that. Yeah, now they have the power to do it.
Yeah, I think because the thing is that look, PlanetSide 2 what is an MMO? Like there's no one says it's not an MMO, but it's not an MMO. It's when you think about PlanetSide 2, you don't think MMO, you think first person shooter. In technically, like Elite is an MMO, but I wouldn't sit here and say Elite is an MMO. Elite is a space simulator. It's an explorer. You do all these other things, but I don't put it in the same kind of mindset as an MMO. An MMO is it's going to sound awful, but you know it when you see it, kind of thing. There has to be a vibe to it in terms of how it functions. Because like EVE is an MMO, but so is like Lord of the Rings Online. So is, Ultima Online. So is Guild Wars. And, there's just so many different people, the things that are MMOs. So like when we talk about, MMOification, like what I'm saying is Star Citizen's getting monster hunting. It's getting world bosses. It's getting instance dungeons with Area 18's The Depths. It's getting it's getting things you would see in an MMO, but just in the context of the Star Citizen universe. So like when I say Star Citizen is an MMO, it's always kind of been an MMO, but now it's becoming the classic MMO sort of approach to gameplay. So because as Linda says, MMO just means massively multiplayer online. Like I think the question is, when does it become a massively multiplayer? Because like DayZ is an MMO because you get like 120 people in there. I don't think people would call it an MMO though. So, but yeah. All right.
So is there a person limit for a massively multiplayer?
I've heard the definition is about 100. If you can get 100 people or more in one server, then it's technically an MMO. But I've also that is a old like sort of definition that was half remembered from a website that there's like, the old joke that I say, which is definitions in gaming make no sense. Genres are all bullshit. No one knows what the fuck they're talking about. We all just kind of exist on vibes when it comes to genre. So
I think the promise of server meshing is what kept us believing it's gonna be an MMO.
Yeah.
Like that was the major thing, because no one would care to call it an MMO if we knew that for the entirety of our lives we will be limited to like 100 player servers, right? Or maybe like 150, right? That what makes an MMO. Like the promise of server meshing and then dynamic server meshing, when we could scale to actually gigantic shards far in future with dynamic server meshing, right? That what makes us as players believe that it's going to be a proper.
Yeah. I feel like when people think of an MMO, they think of a large number of players being able to exist in a persistent setting.
Yeah.
Online in a game. And we have servers that can handle more than 100 players now, but we don't have the persistence yet. At least not in a way that reflects what like a MMO is, as in full persistence between players.
But yeah, you still have this Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, you're still like have this thing, right, where whenever you exit to menu, if you don't have aggression, you just appear, like, let's say at the easy hub, right, somewhere. That obviously has to go away, right?
Yeah. So
I don't know how, like, that's a game design question. A lot of that, like, I have my own opinions about it. I will not go into them right now because it's a whole other talk.
Yeah.
But that thing, when that changes, and we now, thanks God, have the server recovery, which was a major step. Instead of seeing like the 30K, we're just, we're getting a server error. We wait for like a minute or two, and we're just continue to do what we were doing, right? That was a major step to MMOification. Now they just got to deal with all these loggings and log offs, and that will be another like major step to the game feeling like bad logging, team play, like, so we need back the ability to log in our like group ship, because they took it away with this new system. All of that will play a huge role when that is all back in the game, and like the players don't just disappear. All of that will play a huge role in the game feeling for players, like an actual like persistent world.
That actually leads directly into the next question, which is why I was letting y'all keep talking, because the question from Dow the Gamer asks, where do you think the full persistence is? Logging in where you log out, logging in where you log out, and so on. It seems CIG has been silent at this topic at the moment.
I'll let others speak, and then I can speak for this for an hour, so I'll be quiet. You guys say what you think, and I'll.
The question is specifically where do you think it is? And I personally think it's the back end is on fire, and CIG is firefighting the back end. They're trying to figure out how to get the hybrid service not to die every time it like sniffs more than 17 players in a server. So that problem is more important for them to deal with, and then they have to deal with the problem of persistence, because they kind of have that technology already there, but then they have to kind of attach it to players. And I think that is going to be a post 4.0 thing. I do think, though, that full proper persistence, the way that we all imagined it is going to be, is probably going to be a year away, if not less, because they're going to have to start dealing with that when they put in bases. And base building is going to require that system to exist. And they want, and it's clear that CIG is trying to target bases for next year. Again, this is CIG targeting, so that means fucking nothing. But it's still, in terms of
100% better aim.
Yeah, it's still better. It's still a good idea in terms of like what they're shooting for. And to get bases in, they're going to have a bunch of different things that have to come in first. And I think one of those is going to be persistence. I think that has to come in before bases have show up. So it's within 12 to 18 months based off of what we've seen.
Yeah. And I think that there needs to be, they need to get the game to a point where where the servers are not directly impacting your ability to progress or do anything at all in the game. When was it? It was earlier this year. It was this spring that they were running the like Xenothreat Incursion event where you had like the 5 different things that you had to do, right? And you had to do each of them like 5 or 6 times, and then you got the F7A Mark II or whatever. I had a lot of issues with that event because I would be doing it and I would get to the end of one of the contracts and have like one guy left, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the server would die, so the server recovery would kick in. So it wouldn't boot you out to main menu, but it would swap you over to a new server. But when it would swap you over to a new server, it would completely wipe your progress on that quest. So in the course of doing 5 completions of a quest, I did it 25 times.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And
it's annoying.
And it was incredibly frustrating.
4.0 has that fix. That's the where if you crash, you come in. So it's like that's coming in the next patch.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is they need a way for you for things to be able to go wrong, and you to be able to them to be able to either seamlessly transfer you to a new server, or if you crash and have to reload, you can come back in the same progress and not lose the progress that you have. And that goes with anything, right? Like if you're out mining, I think if you crash to desktop or if if you crash the desktop, if you don't re-log in back fast enough, it's just gonna put your ship in claim, and you need to spawn you back at whatever station it is. They need to be able to have the persistence enabled in a way that when things go wrong on their end, it doesn't completely fuck you over and make you lose 5 hours of progress.
Someone's asking if they clarified that missions persisting was a bug. Currently, yes, but they actually have a system in 4.0, which is the mission revamp, which basically means that if you, because basically right now missions are DGS based, so they're based off of your dedicated game server. But with 4.0, you have anywhere between
shards, right?
2 and 8 dedicated game servers inside one shard. So you need to have a way that the mission can then go across that dedicated game server. And so
basically, a replication layer keeps them, right?
Basically, yeah. It's putting the missions on the replication layer rather than being on the on the server. And so that's a system they've written, they've tested it, and it's currently in 4.0, I think, being tested. So
and this is what I'm saying is they
need that in that. Yeah.
they're getting these systems in, and that's part of what is going to make it like an actual functional MMO experience, at least in my personal opinion.
100%, yeah, because once we have, you could be wandering around on Microtech, you've parked your ship behind X tree over there by Y mountain, you've walked away from it to hunt down whatever, and you can log off, or God forbid power goes out in your house, computer shuts down. You get back into the game, you're right back where you were instead of randomly popping back at a station. That's where it becomes a true MMO. You log back in where you left off with the still current active mission. Sure, your mission's probably like 10 more miles away by now, but it's still there. All of that is where we come back to it, and where it actually becomes something substantial.
Yeah.
Cutlet?
Yeah, I definitely think that the player persistence as a character in the universe has it has to improve, and it plays a great role, as I already said, in how players perceive the game as an MMO. Currently, the fact that this escaping I will put a little bit of a PvP perspective into this, like escaping this danger. All of these combat timers, they don't work properly. There are ways to abuse them, like escaping danger by just logging off to not lose your like gear set or something. Just carelessly alt F4ing in the game, or if you don't like something, you just exit to menu. I understand that there is an argument against that. Well, the game is so like broken, we sometimes need to do it. I don't think that that is like an excuse enough to keep going with this logic. I think the player existence in the world should be quite permanent. I might sound a little bit hardcore here, but someone exiting the game in the middle of somewhere should keep them where they are. It's up to like game designers to specifically decide what consequences that will have, like compared to bad logging. Like, let's say if you bad log your food, water, temperature, nothing changes, you can stay bad log like forever and then come back like in a week and continue from where you bad logged. And while if you exit somewhere in the middle of nowhere without like a ship, without a bed, you have like, let's say, consequences for that. You kind of hibernate, and like, let's say your food and water goes down like 3 times slower or 5 times slower, but you cannot like infinitely, like it's up to game designers to specifically think about it, how it should work. But that should be a thing. Like, I want to see things, if someone bad logs in a ship, like let's say there's a crew running, right? There is a ship and there is a crew running with like 5 people and they have 5 beds. I want to see when someone goes and bad logs, that player doesn't disappear from. I want to see them being in that bed, right? For multiple reasons. For a reason of like exploiting this as a bad player, for a reason of just being more realistic, for a reason of another player shouldn't be able to use that bed too to log off, so you cannot have like 100 players logging in off into the same bed, you know? Multiple reasons. I want that persistence. And obviously, like, this inevitably brings the question of shard hopping, either because you're looking for content or you're trying to dodge content, aka PvP, when you're actively trying to like disrupt the game and the consequences of your actions just because you're a whatever, you don't want to deal with them, and you just exploit the fact that we don't have a unified world, so you hop the shards. I think all of that should be really thought through by CAG, and I don't see them putting much effort into it. So I hope that will get addressed. Things like actually selecting which shards you go and how you do that. That should be like, remember when they brought in all this like stuff like a year ago, or when was it, like the replication layer, how they told us, oh yeah, like, yeah, manually choosing the shards, that's just around the corner. Hey, guess what, that corner is too far away. Apparently I still don't see it, that corner, it's somewhere so far. So
I mean,
all of
they
this,
showed it functioning. They showed it functioning at last SitCon.
no, they never show the shard selection being it.
The shard selection, yeah. Like we can't like
the shard selection.
Yeah.
Because
That
like
all is important.
Because if you
Like,
if you have like a mission and you log out or you crash, if you can't get back in the same shard, you're fucked. So like because it's connected to your shard, not connected to anything else. So like if Cutlet's has, if I'm trying to join Cutlet in his shard, I have no way of joining his shard unless I have him specifically like friended or other things like that. So
even if you have him in a friend list,
yeah,
then that shard is full. You cannot do that. And for years, speaking about MMOification, for years we don't have a simple thing as a queue.
Yeah,
like I want to be able to join, like, I don't know, AstroPub, and I want to just right click on him, and it will tell me, sorry, this shard is full. You are 169th in a queue.
Yeah.
And okay, I'll wait. No problems. I'll wait 5-10 minutes, half an hour. I just want to get there, right? I don't have ability to do so. Yeah, those things have to be solved so we can perceive this much more as an MMO.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
All right, next question, and I'm gonna tackle this a little bit because it's from 89 Dig Doug, who asks, why do people fear losing gear that they can get again so badly? Will we be able to make it? We will be able to make it or buy it. So And this is kind of coming up to another one, which is someone who was asking. Someone was asking specifically about like, why do you people like why I'm trying to see if we can find the actual question here to kind of add it to it. I guess they didn't. Anywho, like, why do people? So, for those of you who haven't done an MMO, high level gear is completely different depending on what goal you're achieving. In traditional MMOs, you have your like grinding gear, which is designed to help you with like XP bonuses or dealing with specific types of mobs, or like, for instance, say you're going into the Chasm of Fire. Well, if you got ice armor or weapons, it's probably going to do a little bit more damage to the fire creatures in there. So you're going to equip your ice gear so you can go into the Chasm of Fire and then grind out whatever you need to do. If you're going in, and using a Star Citizen example, if you're going into Pyro, you probably want to have gear which is designed to withstand like solar bursts, and probably a little bit more gear that's designed around, you know, either running away or better armor or something, because you're going to be in more danger. Maybe you don't take you don't take your best equipment ever, but you take equipment you're okay with losing that's still functional. Versus if you're hanging out in, you know, Area 18 going into the depths, you might want to get the better armor you have because you don't care about what you have in your ship, but you want to have, you know, revive packs and, you know, the special ammunition that you can deal with specific type of enemies. And then PvP gear is completely different from like from like raid gear, from your grinding gear. You have different gear levels that everyone wants to take for different reasons. And the whole kind of idea of like gear fear is, if you are stepping out with your best gear for something like PvP, you should be afraid that you are not prepared for the right encounter you're going to have. Because if you step out in your PvP gear and you run smack dab into a Vandal invasion, and now you have to deal with like a horde, you didn't spec out your ship to be able to fight like 17 ships coming at you at once. You were just spec out your ship so you could solo kill that one dude who's really hard to kill. And that's where that sort of fear should come in, where you have to plan and prepare properly. But when you plan or prepare, you're always taking a risk that you are not prepared for the right thing.
Yeah.
And having the right thing is important. That's where that sort of that crafting element comes in, because you want somebody to be like, this specialized scattergun loadout that I have is only made by Paul Shelley. He's the one who knows how to make it. He has the highest tier that I know. He likes me, so he gives me a discount. I can't lose this because I don't have the cash to buy it back, or it's going to take me hours to get this back so I can pay Paul for it, because there's no way, or even to get the materials to give Paul so that he can make it for me.
Yeah.
That is more intense of a feeling. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I feel like.
Go ahead, Astro.
Go ahead.
No, okay. I feel like a lot of the perception on like the gear fear is also based around the current game state that we have, which is like it's so easy to lose your gear to random bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are looking at the game right now and saying, I could lose my gear to an asteroid that didn't render properly, and I just wasn't able to see it and crashed into it. Or I was dogfighting a ship and it desynced and crashed into me because the servers are shit, right? There's so much stuff in the game right now that is that is completely and totally out of your control, that can cause you to lose hours of progress. And I think people are looking at that and saying, okay, if right now I can lose hours of progress by getting messed up by random bullshit, and the claim timers are way faster than they will be in the like full release version, and things are probably cheaper now than they will be in the full release version, why would I even bother playing? But I think that if they can iron out those issues and make it so that if you lose your stuff, it's going to be 100% your fault, right?
Mhm.
And even now they have stuff like this, like the ship soft death, where your ship just like turns off and isn't completely destroyed, and you can potentially come back and like salvage your components and stuff later. So I think that what we really need to do, as far as with like the gear fear, like the fear of losing gear, is we just need to wait and see where CIG takes it, and then we can like if they do a bad job, we can complain about it.
Yeah.
Right. But if they balance it properly, then it should be fine. And thankfully CIG is pretty good at actually listening to their players and their community about what is working and what's not. So that's just kind of what we need to look at. But as it is right now, I'm still running into bunkers in nothing but an undersuit and an arc light pistol.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to risk because I don't want to risk
the
my
real
expensive
gear
armor.
fear.
Yeah.
And then I just rip armor off of the first Xenothreat goon that I kill, and then I'm good to go, right? Because I don't want to spend money on gear, especially if I'm prone to lose it to just like random bullshit.
Yeah. And that goes into another question we'll have, a question that's talks about degradation, but we'll talk about it here in a moment. Cutler, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think it's overall there are two major ways in MMOs. The MMOs that where you don't lose gear, World or Warcraft and others, and then the MMOs that you lose gear. And it's just players, like people have to understand those games are balanced completely differently.
Mhm.
In the first example, you can grind for your gear for months, and like a single item can be a result of multiple raids done on repeat over and over and over. But once you obtain it, you don't lose it, right? And then there is the games where you lose your gear. Those games never like force you to grind for like a 1 month to get one item. It's just a different logic and balance of the game. You obtain easier, you lose easier, but then you can obtain a higher grades of it, and every grade is much more expensive, and it's up to a player. Going back to the example of what Paul said with are you equipping for this, for that, for PvP, for PvE? Like it's a usual, like normal scenario where that there's a minimal PvP danger, a theoretical danger, but like a tough PvE opponent that will grant you a lot of like reward. You will get a lot of good stuff on you because in your mind you kind of weigh the risks. Okay, I'm getting this like good stuff, so I'm equipping to actually be able to clear that content because my PvP like chances are minimal, right? And then you go to PvP, you want to have fun, you would either you're really good and you can afford like go into crazy shit gear, right? But usually it will be like I'll just do half trash gear just to get some practice in. If I die, I die, and then you don't have this like crazy gear fear because it's the worst thing when you're not experienced player and you just put everything best and go to PvP, and that's where the gear fear strikes in, and that's when it kills you because you stop coming up with proper decisions. So like managing that like thing is very important because in PvP, in a lot of times it's not always about the gear, it's about the proper decisions. And having a really expensive gear, if you're an unexperienced player, that what makes you making a bad decisions because you're under stress, and that's when you lose stuff, right? So yeah, that's one like it's also like on players how to manage that gear fear. And I just hope like the game will get to that point where all what I'm saying is like a valid thing,
Yeah.
with the gear fear and all that.
It's clear that CIG is moving in the direction of they want you to lose your gear or to force you to go back and get your gear. Yes, Bo?
Partially.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying is correct to a point, Cutlet. The gear fear that they're talking about right now, pointless. We can go out and buy it again. The only thing we're really out is time, and a little bit of in-game money. Big whoop. in the future, there's going to be a lot more reasons to go out and get our gear. Yes, there'll be some better ways to get it back, but for the most part, gear fear now is pointless. Gear fear later is certainly something we have to deal with and do correctly. And the old adage from Eve, can't afford to lose it, don't fly it.
Yep.
Don't fly it if you can't afford to lose it.
And Elite, don't fly unless you can afford the buyback.
Exactly. So. But that goes into the insurance topic as well, because a lot of these things are intermixed. I think CAG is going to have to make a decision at some point in the future where they have to choose what gets covered by that insurance and what doesn't. Is it, yes, you have some upgrades on your ships, so you get all the commonly available upgrades, but anything that's made by a player, sorry, it's gone. That'll fix the issue of the buy one and done type loop from players and gets away from the WoW style gearing and crafting system. So there's a lot of stuff that we still need to know about first, but they're going to have to make a choice on sooner or later.
That actually comes up with another question. Who's asking? Okay, so Jin asks, "Are y'all forgetting about not considering about warranty is going to be limited, or are you working under the assumption that all ships will have LTI?" So I think there was a miscommunication here. What Cutlet and I think most of us were saying was we understand that warranties are specific, and he even said that, like CIG has said, that warranties not purchased by ships, not purchasing when you buy your ships, are going to be super hard to get. Like you have to complete the main story to get one. And so, you skip this one. Are you saying skip the one? Okay. So, but to clarify, what we were talking about was the idea was that that LTI or the tier is what matters. I think the biggest problem, and I think because Jen also asks, would getting rid of tier 2 and tier 3 solve this issue, or there is no warranty on upgrades and decorations? Warranty only hands back the base hull and standard components. Tier 2 and 3 would mandate your components and upgrades. And then somebody else was asking this as well. I'm trying to find some of the other ones. Do you think that when an item is replaced, should the player go get it from a specific location where it's generated in the PU and go deliver it, like starter ships excluded? That kind of question, like how would you deal with this recovering thing? If we're having problems with the tier 3 insurance covering everything, and I mean my simple answer is player made stuff you don't get back. It's not covered under warranty. Player made stuff is not covered under warranty. Just hands down, player made gear is not covered under warranty.
Handcrafted one of a kind item made by Cutlet out of players' bones. It's not available on the market.
Yeah, but they'll give you the money back. That's the simplest answer. Just give you
the fair market value back.
Out of players' cargo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Sorry,
I'm not that savage. Come on. I try to even make my victims still live through the encounter.
We had very different experiences in Eve, sir. I had a cargo crate full of corpses.
No. Well, we're talking about Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. That's fair.
But I think there are solutions. There are simple solutions. Like that's a simple solution that CIG could implement that would solve a lot of the problems, which is just like, you still have to come get Paul Shelley's super secret special, a moonshine so you can get your buff, and you don't just get it back because you died. But now you get the money for it. It's like, it's only worth half the price because it was degraded since you decided to leave it out in a like a noxious environment, but you could still get some cash for it. And then that cuts the problem of you having to like pay for it again. You still have the money for it. You just need to go back and now earn a little bit more money and go find that person and pay for them again. Pretty simple.
Yeah. Like for me, as I said, I'm a strong believer. I might be wrong, but I think warranty should cover only stock, or maybe basic tier 1 that is like available everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else above should be priced by an average like market price or something. and you should get money like for tier 2, you should get just UAC back. And obviously, if and then you go and buy those items yourself from players or whatever, or if it was like something special from an NPC corporation, which that item, let's say, requires you to spend like loyalty points with them besides money, then you have to grind those loyalty points again or something. And then if you lose your stuff somewhere in Pyro, which let's say gets only to tier 1, then it's just a tier 1 and you don't even get like extra money back, right? But like I just want it sounds a little bit like too hardcore, so I want to find myself in my head this way of not over punishing casual players, and like maybe like introducing something like a, let's say, insecure zones, right? Something like a Tarkov insurance.
Yeah.
So if you're getting killed like NPCs, or if you crash into an asteroid in a secure zone where like Terra or something, after you make a claim, I think it's fine if no one have ever, and that's, let's say that claim is like a day, right?
Yeah.
And your insurance company kind of, well, not maybe it will not be physically done, but in the logic of the game, it kind of asks a towing company or whatever to get whatever is left of your ship back, right? So if the stuff wasn't taken from that wreck, let's say, until that timer is up, then you get those items back. So it wasn't a PvP encounter, no one want to take it, you just crashed into a roid, or you died to some NPCs that are not willing to take your items, and then they can implement like Tarkov insurance. Everything that survived and is there, you actually get it back. And the items that have not survived or were stolen, you get like money for that, right? That could be also like they can mix in a little bit of Tarkov there. So because like we need a way to not punish casual players in high security zones, but then again, it should be done like in a way it doesn't generate like duping and all of that stuff. And that's why exactly I talk about the Tarkov insurance. If someone still stole item from you, you will get the money back minus premium, so you have to work for it a little bit, but you don't get the same item twice. I think that is the critical thing that has to happen. That has to like click in the heads of decision makers in the CAG. Otherwise, like we will slowly be going to the death of not of a spaceman, but to the death of a space game where things will just stop matter because everyone has everything, they always get it back, and then we're gonna get into a really dangerous moment where, like, you grind it up to your ship, you have like millions in your bank account, you die, you just deduct from those millions, and you don't really care, you just get everything. That's like gotta be a balance.
It's also important because there was someone in chat, or Jin was saying, so basically what you said was effectively what Jin was saying. I didn't read that as that, because when Jin said T1, T2, T3, would have wrote T2, T3, my thought was, but isn't like tier 2, tier 3 insurance? Why would we want to get rid of that? We don't want to get rid of, people losing their Chris Roberts bobblehead on their freelancer, because like that doesn't fucking matter. It's just a Chris Roberts bobblehead. Let them give their fucking decorations back. Well, I didn't realize, Jen, you were talking about tier 2, tier 3 gear, because like that's the Sage's bad at naming. So when we're talking about tier 2, tier 3, we're talking about like gear levels, and then the insurance itself has tier 1, 2, and 3 levels. So
it's a little bit like complicated with all the tiers. Like all the like the vanity things, like bobbleheads and all the stuff. I don't know why they even put it into this like insurance tiers.
Yeah, they should just get it back.
I think they should like separate them, and like all the vanity that is like available freely, like chair, you have your carrack, it is decorated with like just usual chairs that are sold like everywhere by players, by NPCs, doesn't matter. That shouldn't be a problem to, like, if you pay for that, to get that back. Yes, if you have a unique decoration that is not like available openly on the market, then you should have a problem, right? I think then you should have a problem with that, and then it would put that decoration back in your ship. Only you have like another one somewhere in your hangar. It will take it from the hangar and put it in your ship, just so you don't do it again by hands. It's like literally, let's say you have a Carrack, right? You have a Carrack, and it's decorated, right? You can do like not a blueprint, but like a snapshot of how it looks with all the stuff. And then when you get the Carrack back, if you have the items in your hangar that are required for that decoration, they're just automatically placed. So you don't do it every time, because that will get super tedious, like redecorating your ship. But if you have the decorations that are impossible to get for whatever reason, bro, maybe you should keep that decorations in your hangar under like under a lock, just to be proud of them. Don't fly a Carrack with them. If it's a like one of a kind thing you got like from whatever rare event, and you can never get it back, just keep it in a museum, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Cutler, you mentioned something that I was actually thinking about when they talked about the like insurance and warranty system, which is the potential of duping, because I think it is a big problem, especially if we have these like special items that can be crafted. Especially because your ship does not have to be totaled to be claimed.
No.
It just has to, at least in the current game state, it just has to not be at the hangar where you're at, and you can claim it. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of either like specific components, just straight up you can't claim them, or they need to have some sort of verification process where they have to check like, oh, your ship was totaled. Okay, we'll replace it, and we'll replace all the components. But if they find out, oh no, it was just lost, then we're just gonna give you the basic components, and maybe like maybe they just give you the factory components and then give you like a tracking beacon to where your shipwreck is. Or
They said that they will give you like a shuttle and all that stuff. Yeah,
but yeah, it's a very again, it's a very fine line that they need to walk here with this, to make it not so punishing for casual players, but also to A, keep the economy running, and B, prevent people from cheesing by like duping items by just repeatedly claiming their ship with warranty. And maybe it could be as simple as something like if you claim your ship more than once in a 7-day period, then it like makes the next claim timer like exponentially
longer, more expensive. Yeah, those are like the details. Like the whole idea of the whole thing that goes in my head. I just want this game to work long term. There are like multiple solutions you can go to. You just have to pick one of the good ones, where in that solution there will, like, the duping will not exist, and the player economy can exist alongside with like an NPC economy, right? Where players give you like better stuff, like NPCs can give you like the basic stuff. It doesn't matter exactly how, but like, so the player economy doesn't die because everyone has everything and they get everything from insurance, and like, oh, like, you know, but not every ship is going to be warranty. How do you know? Like, with what they said in 1.0, I bet like a lot of people will get the main ships they're going to be flying with warranty now. They will rethink their hangars a lot. Like, you cannot like build your game expecting this or that would happen. What if it doesn't? What? All the game goes to shit? You know, like, you cannot. You have to create a solid system that it doesn't matter, will the player buy the ship for money with his card, or will he buy it like with in-game money, right?
Yeah.
So that's the main thing.
Luna is asking what player economy. This is for clarification for folks. We're talking about the proposed player economy that CIG is saying, where players can craft the highest level tier equipment that you won't really find in the NPC economy. So like that sort of thing is what we're talking about. So
yeah.
All right. There's a couple more. I've managed to whittle down some more questions here. So we only have like 10 questions. Some of them are going to go pretty quick because Jen asks, couldn't they write a story that is a good introduction to Star Citizen and the lore of the Averse that doesn't require you to be the chosen one? Yes. And
Yes.
there
100%.
is a needle they have to thread though with that. And I'm interested to seeing how they're going to do it. I think we talked about that in general.
Yeah, they need to make the story interesting enough to not get boring and make people just make it like a complete slog, but avoid falling into the tropes of storytelling that makes a player a chosen one.
Yeah.
And I think a good way to do it is just have you like have a lot of the missions be like doing something that is going to be influential to allow the actual UEE to go in and do the proper job with the big guns. But you are not the big guns because you are just one person.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
They said the storyline is going to revolve around the tensions between Earth and Terra.
Yeah.
Between Death of Spaceman, Regen Tech, and this type of system and citizenship requiring some type of service to the UEE, can't they make it a revolving door, sort of like Planet Side, where you've got 2 or 3 different factions vying for control of whatever?
Yeah.
And every time you yourself need a new body, you've gone through 5 or 10 deaths, however long it is, your clone is no longer viable. You now have to choose and make a new character. You're no longer a citizen because it's not hereditary, and you have to go back through this pulling one way or the other style mission set to regain that citizenship if you want to.
Possibly. I don't know if they'll do that though. I hope they don't, but we'll see. Because I really hope that it's not like you have to constantly redo it. I do want it to be replayable in some way though. I do think that the key is introduce characters who are interesting that will tie you to the universe and move you forward so that you have when you play the missions, you go, I want to side with this faction or I want to side with this faction, because players need to feel like they have a choice in where the universe goes. Even if it's like, well, you're choosing the side that's eventually going to lose, your player wants to make that choice. You know, how many people want to fight for Xenothreat all the time when the Xenothreat invasion? They want to do that because they think it's fun.
I was gonna mention that because I think that's a great way to give the story more like replay value to like make you want to actually go through it more than just the one time. Because I feel like a lot of MMOs, and as great as the story is in Final Fantasy 14, this is one thing that it kind of falls into is like, if you have to go back and replay it, it's just the same story and it hits all the same story beats.
Yeah.
It like exactly. And so you're just going through stuff that you've done before. But another MMO that I mentioned, which is Knights of the Old Republic, they do this really well where each there's like 2 factions. There's like the Jedi and the Sith, and there's 4 different paths on each faction, and each path has a completely different story.
Yeah.
So if they allowed you to choose a faction, and then each faction or each group that you choose to align with has its own kind of separate story arc that maybe visits the same places but does different things in each location, that would be a really great way of doing it to allow you to still have this streamlined experience that kind of takes you on a tour through the verse, but gets you this new story where you're interacting with new people and learning new things and stuff like that.
People are asking, is citizenship hereditary? No. What I mean is that every time you die in regen, you shouldn't have to redo the entire first beginning of the story again. But like if you get the big death, if your character dies to the point where your imprint viability score is completely dead, and you have to recreate the character that Death of a Spaceman style, then yeah, you think it's entirely reasonable to say go back and do the citizenship again, but that's like that shouldn't be
if you choose to. You don't necessarily have to. You've already done those missions, and you have whatever.
But if you want citizenship,
you got out of it.
Yeah. If they're gonna make you do that though, they can't make the story too long, because if they're making like I mean they could make it like 10-20 hour little story mission, but they can't make it like
just have multiple paths.
Yeah.
Guys, just buy DNA LTI for $29.99. Come on.
That's 5 head right there.
Can I ask you a question? Can we have one question from me?
Sure.
What do you guys think about Death of a Spaceman?
I think it still works, personally. I think it's going to require a lot of balance to it.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's fine. I think
key,
we just need more info.
Yeah. The key is, how do you inherit from Death of a Spaceman? Because I like the idea of an inheritance tax, because one of the biggest problems that you were talking about earlier, Cutlet, which is people just become these gigantic money sinks where they just like suck up money and then there's nothing to spend it on. And so money becomes pointless and the economy becomes really difficult to balance. But with something like Death of a Spaceman, death comes for everyone eventually. And when that happens, the taxman cometh too and grabs and pulls it back. So especially with players who have these huge wealth hoards that they have, it makes your life matter more. So people are going to be less likely to just be like, I'm gonna blow myself up because I don't want to get pirated. And, they'll do that at first, and then they'll see the huge hit of their IVS and be like, I'm going to lose 50% of my income if I hit this zero. And I think in theory, it can do a really good job of making players care about their lives more, which means that they're more interesting to interact with, and also balance the economy from people going way too high in terms of how much, cash they have. So,
and I think that's also how they're going to go around the issues of Eve's blueprints being constantly available. That whole trap that Eve fell into is they mentioned at CitizenCon that the blueprints were bound to the character. Now they may have just misspoke and they meant account.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
It's questionable. It's a speculation.
If you die, the big death, then are your blueprints gone? And now you as a person with all the knowledge, knowing how to get them, you can go back and get them again. But will they be the same? Or is there a bit of randomness going to be in there?
Yeah, so I personally I'll just answer my question. I specifically brought that up because I know it's like a very controversial topic. I personally am completely not sold of a Death of a Spaceman. For multiple reasons. I think, first of all, it's a very big psychological reason. I keep saying this always on my streams. You don't want to break the bond between a player and their virtual avatar. You just don't want to do it in a generic, like, psychological gaming way. You don't want to do it, and period. Unless your entire game is revolving on a hardcore like set where the whole idea of you is not to die once. I think it's a really bad move to try and break that bond and tell someone to go just create another character. Because whenever like that happens, there is like a big chance not a big chance, but there is always a chance a player would just say fuck it and uninstall. Because, for example, they were very attached, because like different people attach differently to games and to characters, and some of them get really attached even if they don't like suspect it, like subconsciously. I think that's like the first point I want to make. It's a psychological point. Then to counter it, I think and also, like, just to add to it, like, someone dying is in a lot of cases not in their hands. Yeah, they theoretically they made initially bad decisions to going somewhere, but like there always would be people who would be just like murder hobbying, and they would care the less about, like, they would be like swapping that characters as like daily gloves or like whatever, they wouldn't care, but they will actually stress out other players who care about their characters, and it would be out of control of those players in a lot of cases. So I think personally, like, death of a spaceman for me is not really a good idea in general. I know it contradicts a lot what of Chris believes. I'm just basically speaking what I think.
No, I got it.
And I would say a death tax every time you die should be just properly manageable and done in a way you don't want to die in the moment. Not that you think about that far moment that you will run out of lives. You don't want to die every time in a moment because the game is balanced for you to not willing to die. And that could be a deterrent enough to stop like pressing backspace or whatever. That's my personal opinion. And then all of that stuff with losing money, that creates so many loopholes. I would have my crafting character that will never exit the station and he will never lose any blueprint. I would send all my money to my crafting or third character that whenever my combat character dies, he loses and dies, he loses almost nothing, right?
Yeah, but
there is so many loopholes for that. And that's why I think it will never properly work.
But all those loopholes already have plugs. Like if you send all of your money to your crafting character, you're gonna have to spend the fees and taxes of moving all of that money to the crafting character.
It will be still less.
It'll still be less.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's going to be like, okay, well, 0.5% or whatever. It's
but it's still always going to be like an inconvenience. I think it's a good idea if they balance it right, and I think the balancing is the key part, because this is entirely inspired by Dark Souls, and I have never heard people complain about Dark Souls death system. People understand Dark Souls death system. It is inherent in the idea that if you fuck up enough times, you have to start over basically from scratch. And Chris has even said, and many of the developers have even said, that they don't want to make it as hardcore as Dark Souls, but they definitely want to make it in that vein of like, even having things like, oh, you reach the end of your life, you can do missions or do things to increase your IVS score so you don't have to worry about it. So that sort of thing. And
I think that with Star Citizen as compared to other MMOs, it's not that much of an issue, especially now. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens when they actually implement a story and like actual characters into the game. Because when I play other MMOs like Final Fantasy, for example, that's heavily story based, you make your character, you design them, you give them an actual name, not just your username. And then as you progress through the story, you see cutscenes with your character in it. All of the characters address your character by name. So when you get to the end of that, you're very, very attached to your character. Yep. But with Star Citizen, especially right now, and I mean, we'll see how like in depth the story actually goes, but your character's name is just your username. And you don't have anyone that really particularly interacts with your character as just a character, because the game in its current state is designed as a sim. It's more just like yourself inhabiting the character. So it doesn't actually matter what body your character has, because you're not focused on the fate of the character itself as much as the fate of yourself as the player. At least that's how I see it, as someone who does get extremely attached to my characters in a lot of MMORPGs like WoW and Final Fantasy 14. Which if the game tried to take away one of my characters in WoW or FF14 and say like, you're not allowed to play them anymore, you have to make a new character, I would be pissed as hell. Yeah. But for me, at least in Star Citizen, it doesn't matter. So I think it's not that much of an issue. But yeah, again, it goes back to that kind of, we'll have to wait and see kind of line to see how they implement it, how the story ends up, and how they choose to choose to balance that. And yeah, it's all kind of a maybe at this point.
And don't get me wrong about this. It's not that like probably someone in chat would think, oh, he's just like, because he's a pirate, he will die so much. He wants that like to carve this niche for himself where he doesn't care. I want to say one thing. I bring this up thinking mostly about the casual players and RP guys.
Yeah.
We degenerates, we're gonna meta the shit out of the game. We wouldn't care. We would find the exact way to die, how we die, how much we lose. Everything is gonna be calculated. Mostly people who are like casual, just game enjoyers who want to have some fun, who want to spend time, and like RP guys, those will suffer the most from this thing. Not the guys who Chris think he will punish with this. It's going to be like opposite of the idea of what it has to achieve, right?
Yeah. Right. And that I think that kind of sums up our entire discussion here. Is they need to find a way to balance things to not alienate the casual players while still allowing the hardcore players to get those incredible experiences that they love and enjoy in this game.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next question. We got 8 questions to go through. Some of these are going to be pretty quickly, but a lot of them is going to be long. So I want to save the longer ones for the very end. This one I'm going to read through. I don't know if it's going to be easy to answer, but the old idea was quote unquote overlocked items from the workbench would never be able to be insured for the overclocking. You'd get a new one at the base, new one of the base part, but would need to go through the overclocking process again, and would have to get different results. Do you think they will make it so that the insured items will get their base for the tier version to have the upgraded again? I think we already answered that question. So yeah, we did. So. I mean, yeah, the idea, I mean, because that whole idea is completely different. Overclocking is gone. It's now about like what it is. So I think the question is, will we get a tier 1 back if you have like Paul Shelley's super secret scattergun, and instead of getting Paul Shelley's super secret scattergun, you just get the tier 1 version of that gun? Maybe. Yeah. You know.
No one knows.
No one knows right now.
What they said, they will if we have the warranty, they will return your items back you had on your ship. How they will do it, no one knows. Like, did they specifically phrased it very vague to then roll back and say, oh, we meant tier 1 level of those items, not tier 3? Or are they willing to return tier 3? I think they don't know by themselves, and they made this like wild step already talking about it on CitizenCon, and now they will have to deal with the consequences of what they said. Because like people will hold them to what they said, and it's gonna be a mess when we get close to that. But we'll see how it develops.
And this is all just speculation, but we can just hope that that sometime in the next few months they release like an Inside Star Citizen or something, or a Star Citizen Live talking about insurance that just goes deeper in depth and actually explains how they plan to work that, because they gave us very little information on how on like all the nitty-gritty stuff.
Please, CIG, please give us
please
give us please return to giving us design documents so that we can look at what you were planning on doing. That all of these questions would be answered if you just wrote out a design document being like, this is what we're planning on doing.
I don't think they know.
Well, I know, but I mean, they got to have an idea, at least a high level design document. They got to have an idea.
They have a napkin somewhere with insurance level 1, 2, and 3, and that's all it is.
Yeah. I would love if they just published that, because at least you could point to somebody and be like, this is where how it works.
This is where it all went wrong.
Dr. S'mores asks, where do you think the wear and durability balance should be for all items in the game?
Appropriate.
Yeah, appropriate. That's such
appropriate levels of wear and durability. If it's made out of iron, Midland durability. If it's made out of steel, better. If it's made out of cardboard, probably fairly low.
Yeah.
I think the question goes to like how fast we think the items should go down. It's really hard to answer right now. It's such a speculative question. It also goes into the fact how insurance will return those items. If item was like 50% used, would insurance magically find a 50% used item of the same grade? It's like so many questions that go into that. And then how the insurance will work overall. If the insurance will return you all money, all the items, then probably items should run out very fast. So crafters has something to do. But then if you do that, you don't really feel the loss of the item. You feel it's like durability, where only my god, it's my head explodes right now when I think about it.
There's a lot of things that they have to answer about that. We could be talking about that for hours.
We could have an entire podcast on that.
On just the durability. Yeah, because I mean, like, it's a huge like gaming in general has a problem with breakable stuff. Do I think CIG is going to go, Breath of the Wild style, where like you hit 4 times and it breaks? No, I don't think they're going to do that one. But I also don't think it's going to be a situation where you fire it 10,000 times and you've only lost like 2% durability. They're going to find a balance for it somewhere. And
I also think
knowing CIG, they'll also do things like it depends on what world you go to. Like if you go to a world that has a lot of sandstorms or a lot of radiation, that it's gonna degrade faster. Or if you get shot at a lot, it's gonna
100% the damage. Like I think if the component will get damaged, right? So if this is like the bar, HP bar, and the component get damaged, then you can repair it, but not to 100%, right? Like let's say 1% or like 5%, whatever they decide, or 10% of damage to the component will be irreparable, right? And if you, let's say, if it's down to 0%, it instantly gets like a 25% piece of that bar that is not irreparable on top of everything else it get, like something like that.
Yeah. Bo, you were going to say something?
Nope, it's gone.
Okay. Good one. All right. We only got 6 questions left. Greetings, y'all. My question is, in other MMOs, they have weekly server restarts and maintenances. Why do you think we don't have it in Star Citizen? Do you think it would help with server performance if they would have it here as well? They've actually They actually answered this question.
It's because in Star Citizen, the servers take care of restarting themselves by crashing every few hours.
That's only partially joking. CIG is intentionally beating the hell out of their servers because they want to see where that limit is. They literally are abusing their servers because they want to know where that limit is. And when they get to 1.0, they'll know when they have to shut it down. And they also want to have things like server meshing and stuff like that. So when they do a server reset, it's not like they're going to shut down the entire shard. They're just going to go, nobody's in Stanton right now, shut it down, and then spin it back up later. So,
Eve does it daily, actually.
Yeah.
Midday European time, they do it daily because they know where their limit is. With Star Citizen 100%, they are trying to see, while restarting the servers would probably increase the playability for general public, they are not motivated to do so because they need to see how the servers work long term. What is degrading the servers? Because only like after a certain point of degradation, you can get like the proper data of what is happening, and that's why they're doing it.
And what parts of everything are causing said degradation.
It's data. That's the reason why they don't do it. Data. All right. So we've got 5 more questions. NG Hellstorm asks, how expensive will taxes be on bases, do you think? It depends.
Very.
Yeah.
It would be based, I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
You have an average player, and you cannot balance it for the very casual player, like their average income, because then everyone else will have nothing to do. Yeah. You cannot balance it for the top 5% either, because then everyone below that top 5% will struggle or will not be able to sustain it. So they will balance it somewhere in the middle where it's doable, and like experienced no-lifers will basically not notice it, and like lower tier of players will struggle more, but it has to be like doable. Like if you want to hear the numbers, no one will give them right now. We know what we are even talking about.
Yeah, we have no idea. I feel like they should base it they should base it on the size of the base, as well as the size of the org, and reputation in that zone is probably another good one. And they could just put restrictions on and say like an individual player making a base can only make one so big. Yeah. If you want a bigger one, you have to have an org, but then the org gets taxed by however many players are in the org. Yeah. So if you have a bigger org, you can make a bigger base and you can have more resources, but you're going to be taxed more.
Yeah.
Can I put a tax on my buildings for people living in my town?
Yes. They could. I mean,
would that pay for my taxes for the base?
I mean, yeah. I personally believe that what's going to
slumlord this shit.
I think what'll happen is that groups that are really well known, that have large numbers of people, are going to
just say
test is going to build a base, and then people will come flock to that area because of the protection they'll offer, and test will let them stay there because those people will bring resources, and then they can tax those people to help pay for the taxes or pay for whatever resources they need to. And so you'll just have towns. We're just going to rebuild civilization in the sense of like how every game has said they're going to do it, but CIG is going to actually do it through the application of taxes.
And that's how nullsec alliances appear.
Yeah, that's literally how alliances have happened in EVE and other games like that, is through that sort of thing. Because
or they can tax it by the lengths of the front of the building, and then we'll have all the bases like Amsterdam, like very narrow houses, but very high.
The rule is apes together strong. Okay, that's the rule. Apes together strong, and that's what you're gonna have. So yeah, slumlords in Star Citizen confirmed. All right, we've got 4 more questions, and I'm gonna try to. I'll say, this is specifically for Cutlet, so we'll go this with this. This is specifically for Cutlet, but the rest feel free to chime in. In this regards to high tier blueprints, have you considered the following 2 things? 1, you will not have a warranty on tier 5 ship, much less any FPS equipment. 2, getting tier 3 insurance might only be viable if you are for your main ship, but could spiral out of proportions. If you try to do it with a small fleet and And third, the high tier gear might be complex, expensive to get mass produced.
Oh, it's a very long question. Let's break it down. Like, so the first part was with the tier 5. Right?
The first question was, you will not have warranty on a tier 5 ship, much less any FPS
my
equipment.
question is, why specifically tier 5? Like, why not tier 4? Why not tier 3? I understand that tier 5 is the top one. So by doing this, we separate. There is all other gameplay that doesn't matter, and then there is a tier 5 gameplay. Yeah. It's a wrong approach. Tier 1 to let's say tier 1 is like the stock, but then tier 2, 3, 4, and 5 should just get exponentially more expensive and harder to do. I don't think separating tier 5 as an end game is a good call, because then everyone will spam tier 4.
Yeah.
And that's it. And no one will touch tier 5.
Also, CIG's never said anything about tier 5s can't be warranted. I don't remember.
We never were even hinted in that way. So I don't think that's a good way. You're separating the tier 5 gameplay into something special, which will make all other gameplay it will either make tier 5 irrelevant, because it will be so expensive no one will even bother, it's just out of the window, or vice versa. So I don't think that's the good approach. What was the next part of the question?
The second part of the question was also, and I'll jump on this other one, because first part he also says much less FPS and equipment. We don't know that either, because CIG will almost certainly have insurance for everything at some point. They've talked about it multiple times, including cargo insurance they've mentioned. So there'll be insurance probably for everything. Got to keep that in mind. Second question is, getting tier 3 insurance might only be viable for your main ship, but could spiral out at any proportions if you try to do it with a small fleet. Basically, that it's going to be too expensive. It could be too expensive.
Yeah, this is how it is. So insurance overall has to be like somewhat affordable, right? So again, the same example. If you balance insurance pricing to the point where it easily spirals out of control, that means no one can afford it. But if you balance it even somewhere in the middle where an average player can sustain few ships, that means the top percentage of player will not notice even if they insure the entire fleet. So again, you're giving this you're actually hurting the less experienced players with this logic. If it's not equal logic, then you're just hurting. And then on top of that, you don't need to run insurance on your entire fleet. You will have probably anyway, I don't know, 5 ships or 4 ships you main in combat or whatever you do. You don't need to insure your 20 ships or 50 ships you've pledged to them, right? If only you need something, okay, I will need to fly this ship now and I haven't flown it in 3 months, but I would need it for this job. Okay, I'll drop insurance on it and then you don't pay for it. Again, if you use it for some time and don't pay. So I think it's all half measures that don't really achieve that goal. You got your 3 ships, you constantly insure them. Again, that's my 3 Hornets. I constantly fight on them, and I never come back to Paul to get more guns for them. And that's it. That's my main problem, right? Because I'm going to get everything back.
Yeah. And I agree. We have insurance has to be affordable, even tier 3. It can't be so unaffordable that no one could use it, because then all you would have is people complaining that they can never get their ships back. All right. The last part was that high tier gear might be too complex, expensive to get mass produced. That's the problem.
But that's the point.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. If it is impossible to produce, but you get it back magically from insurance, that's the whole problem. That Paul spent time, I don't know, doing what, producing that gear, and I get it from him once, and then I get it from insurance, and why it's getting duped. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And I think that's what leaves an opening for salvaging to come in, where your one of your Hornets goes down. It's a little bit more. It's full on soft death, crashed into a planet. You're taken out on the ground later. You put in a claim for that ship, but I've already come by and salvaged it and taken off the 3 guns that were on it that were still viable and repaired them. Those shouldn't come back to you as part of that claim.
Yeah.
And then now you have to go back to Paul and get the stuff.
Yeah. Depending on the the location, how unsecure, unlawful the system is, it probably should matter, in my opinion, how much money you get back. In UEC, right? How much premium you pay, but not the items. Yeah. And again, we go back to the Tarkov insurance. If it's a more secure system and you didn't take those guns, it was just an accident, then it's fine. If no one took those guns, it's fine. Insurance can bring them back and you get them back. I'm totally fine with it. And it's just the main problem is if someone takes it to themselves and then insurance creates a copy of them, that's where I have the major problem.
Yeah, and CIG could easily implement this through their, because I don't think CIG is getting rid of the idea that the mission system is run by NPC activity, or the star sim is what they're calling it now, the old quantum system. So you could also have a situation where you make a claim and you get it back, you get the stuff back, but the insurance company says, as much stuff as you can get back, go out and gather as much of the stuff as you can from this ship that went down, pull it back, and so that they can recoup the losses of those things.
Yep.
So that's kind of like where the game can become gamified in terms of these sorts of systems. It can happen. It's just a matter of where CIG wants to go with it. So
yeah, and I think there could be some cool gameplay loops as well, saying like say I crash my ship. I crash my ship, it's destroyed. I respawn back at the station. I claim the ship. The insurance company says, "Okay, we will get you a new ship." They then send a contract that Bo picks up saying, "This is a crash ship. It needs to be salvaged. We'll pay you X amount to go and
chop on the job.
to go and salvage this ship and bring us back anything that you find."
Yeah.
Right. And so that gives not only makes the person who is claiming the ship happy because their insurance is taking care of them or whatever, but it also creates more gameplay opportunities for people of other professions like salvage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if but then it would be up to Bo to say he goes and salvages it, and there are some guns left, and maybe they're fancy guns, and he says, and he
turns destroyed and never saw them again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm saying. He could either turn them in, and the insurance company could pay him a premium and say, "Oh, thanks for returning these rare guns," and then they would return the rare guns to the customer, or Bo could keep them and use them on his own ship or sell them on the black market for for a premium, and then the person, they would say, "Oh, well, your ship was salvaged, but the guns weren't recoverable, so we're just going to pay you out X amount for those guns instead because we couldn't replace them."
Yeah.
So I think that would be a great way to go about it, because that's also creating more gameplay for other players.
Yeah.
With your fuck up.
The point that I think all of this is trying to bring in is that CIG can solve this problem many different ways if they need to. Yes. It's not an insurmountable problem. It's just, as it stands right now, there are some major loopholes that can be exploited by the problem, which makes the game less fun. So
CIG has did the promise, right, with the LTI insurances that if you buy on the pledge store, you will get the base back. And we, no matter how I want to fight even that, I understand we cannot fight it. It's almost close to already legal obligations or something like that, right? Yeah. Unless they create another Star Citizen Hardcore that will work completely differently, right? So that is understandable. I just don't want them to, in this hunt for more money, for more people pledging, I don't want them to start diving into the very dangerous territory when they start promising new stuff, and then they will need to keep that promise, and it will just ruin the gameplay in the long run. Everyone will be happy at first, don't get me wrong, right? That's why, because they're doing, everyone want to all their stuff back always, so they pay more money. But like one wise man said, I don't know what my people want, I know what they need. Right? And then people can want a lot of cool stuff, but then they will not realize to what state the game will come with that logic, and then it will be too late at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just, and when it's too late, the projects usually never recover. Most of them just start spiraling down.
There's always ways to build a restrictive system and then open it up later, rather than building an open system and close it. Because if you build an open system and close it, people are going to get mad. But if you build a restrictive system and open up, people feel more empowered. So, all right. So we've got 3 more questions. I'm going to save the last one, the one that I have at very top for last. It's actually been one of the first questions I was asked, which is very good, and I want us to kind of end us off on that one. The question comes from this question comes from Shimpasta, who asks, "It seems like Chris Roberts is known for single-player games, and Richard Tyre is in charge of making Star Citizen an MMO. How much of the vision and path of Star Citizen do you feel either are in charge of?" The one thing I will say about this is that Chris Roberts worked at Origin. I don't know what his full gamography is. We know what he was in charge of, and people, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the comments or in chat. Origin was a very small company, and people who worked at Origin did a lot of things, even uncredited. People work on projects because they needed, a coder to do this. They needed somebody who knew how to do this. And they made Ultima Online while Chris was working at Origin. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris was involved in that development in some way, shape, or form, or in development of some online services and games as well. So I don't think Chris is necessarily entirely not familiar with online games or even exposed to how the systems function, because again, how game companies work, like I doubt Chris didn't get curious and watch over and say, "Hey, Rich, what you doing here? Can I peek under the system a little bit and see what's going on?" Because that's almost certainly how they all work together with that sort of thing. So with that being said, the question is, how much of vision and path of Star Citizen you feel are either in charge of, Rich or Chris?
So very hard.
I don't think there's any way that we can know or say really. I don't think. I mean, when games like this get made, especially a game like Star Citizen, where so many of the people who work at CIG work there because they are invested in the project and in the dream and the vision of the game itself.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's possible to attribute the game to the vision of just one person. I'm sure that there's a lot of there's a lot of minds and a lot of thoughts and ideas that go into kind of the melting pot that eventually coalesces in the final product of this game.
Yeah, I will say this. I'm a personal believer, and I believe a lot of folks are, that video games are collective art. They're collaborative art. We talk about a Chris Roberts or a Hideo Kojima or, the big names, Todd Howard. Todd Howard didn't personally code every single Bethesda game. Like, there was a team of people who worked on it, and Todd didn't make all of the decisions. Todd was in the team that were making the decisions, talking with the writers and the animators and the quest designers, and they would work together on solving the problem, because video games are too complicated, especially now, to do just solo. And they've never been really a solo project. The people who do are insane, and those people need all sorts of. But even then, a lot of times they don't either. They hire contractors and other things. So
I would say that the very, very original Kickstarter, the very original concept of Star Citizen was probably almost entirely from the minds of Chris Roberts. But the game as we have it now is completely different from it's almost entirely different from what the original Kickstarter concept was. Yeah. And the game as it comes out, when it is like when 1.0 comes out, is going to be completely and entirely different from what we have now.
Yeah. I'll also address something. Someone saying there's not even a stated plans that crafting was a player to drive some player economy. Yes, CitizenCon, the player base, they actually started off with the idea of player-based economy. I also referenced it in 1.0. Yeah. Go watch that video because they specifically talked about the player-based economy and tier systems.
They talked a lot about it.
Yeah,
they talked a lot about it.
Yep. But yeah, so and the fact of the matter is that very few games are pure visions. Almost no game comes out as this is the idea, and then it comes out exactly as it was thought. Games change all the time. I'd like to bring up Halo as a good example. Halo was an RTS, and then it was a third-person shooter, and then it was finally a first-person shooter. It originally started off as an RTS on an RTS on Mac. Then it got moved into being a third-person shooter, and then became a first-person shooter on Xbox. So it changed a lot. And like Final Fantasy, I want to say 15 originally was a Versus title. It wasn't even a mainline title that got eventually turned into Final Fantasy 15. I recently discovered that Titanfall was originally going to be you were fighting demons on the exterior of a spaceship. Like, that was the original pitch for Titanfall. So there's just lots of random stuff that it gets started off as, and it kind of coalesces into what it's going to be. So it's not surprising that Star Citizen has gone through changes as it's evolved. It's actually surprising it's not as drastic of changes as it originally was pitched, because it's still pretty in the same genre, at least, or mostly. So when it comes to the question of who's in charge of vision, there's no singular vision in that sense. It's going to change.
Ideas are just getting pitched, and then there are decision makers who think, are this idea is good or not? Like someone on YouTube commented very, very well. Chris once said that there would be no crafting, and that is true. He did that, especially with crafting ships, because I remember the talk. I was very upset when I heard that, because I remember the talk, like how he usually like gives us the speeches, and he's like, yeah, like if I would do the crafting, I would do it so players actually like craft the ship, like, you know, like screw in the like the rivets and everything. And because we understand that this is technically not possible, like we will probably not do crafting. And I was like why? Like we can do like just make manufacture, make like result. And here we go. We are at this point where yes, they realize it's good for the game. We don't need to screw in every fucking every freaking screw, right?
You can swear.
We can just do without it, and you know, and still have a good game, right? So I honestly think, like, I might sound a bit negative right now, but I feel like the sometimes decision makers in at CAG are a little bit too far from the actual gamers. There's like this huge hierarchy, right? That CAG built over the years, almost like bureaucracy, I can say. And I definitely know developers who are so balls deep into the gameplay, like I can communicate with them freely, openly, like they understand. But then the feedback, it iterates so much. Whenever it reaches like the top, it's either diminished completely or it's like changed in a way like the original like point like players would try to make to CAG. It's so twisted, like the proper decision isn't made. And I think a lot of like people like Chris and Rich, I don't know what's their gaming backgrounds, but it sometimes feels like they're so far from the game itself. They live with this like vision, but its implementation that then like sometimes isn't executed properly, so it's actual playable like game for gamers, right? And that is my main like gripe with that with this company. Like it feels like just get down like and like understand what's the deal here, right? Like, you know, and it's not happening.
I totally agree, because I feel like CIG as a whole is very good at communicating with the player base. I mean, there's devs on Spectrum and on Reddit and even in game and in Twitch streams and in
probably
the comments
watching
YouTube
this right
videos
now.
that are,
it's funny enough. Probably
they
people watching this right now. So
they comment all the time. You know, they talk to the players constantly, and you know they're listening, but then you know, somewhere along the lines that like when something happens that like they announce something and then players don't like it, and you have all these devs saying we understand, we're going to change it, and then 2 weeks later you get something coming down on Spectrum that like doubles down on what the players don't like, and it's like and it's like that had to have come from someone higher up that just doesn't have
there.
that line of communication with the player, and somewhere in that chain of command, that communication that the devs are taking from the players that is so amazing is just not getting through. It's just getting stonewalled and just not getting through. And then it takes, you know, they come out with that, and then there's huge backlash and YouTube videos on it and stuff like that, and then they finally cave and change it. But it's just like
CIG is the
it's like,
company.
I know there are so many people at CIG that listen to the players and care, and it feels like there are just some people very, very high up in the company who actually make the decisions that don't listen.
Yeah, I will say that it's not a unique problem to CIG. This is a problem.
It's not.
It's a problem that I've heard from, like, my father, who worked in the corporate spaces for almost his whole life. One of his biggest problems was that the average high level manager has no idea what the line level employee is doing.
Yeah.
And as a result, they don't get the consequences of what their decisions are going to be. And that's why when things go bad, they go horrible, because people at top don't really understand the people at the bottom. And with CIG, and this is a problem with game companies. I've heard so many people play your own games. Devs need to play their own games because they need to understand what the game is like, and they don't. And I agree. I think
it's definitely not an isolated issue with CIG. I think it just feels worse because we know for a fact that there are people at the company
listening to us
that talk to us and listen and care.
Yeah. So what I will repeat this pitch one more time, because it's a fun pitch to have. CIG, please, once a month, have Richard or Chris sit down and play their game for 4 hours. Just have them sit down and stream it and watch them play it.
Actually, not
they
even
might
them
be able to log in.
Yeah.
I think it's not even like them playing the game. Like, I've seen successful companies have practices of open talks with players, and it's not like just like, oh, I know one dev in CAG or 2 devs that are willing to listen to me, right? But then it goes nowhere. Like, take Tarkov as an example. Nikita would freaking sit with, like, Pestily, let's say, and they would do online. Literally, the main guy in the company would go to the podcast with one of the major, like, streamers who's super knowledgeable at the game. He is a major streamer because he's super knowledgeable at the game, right? And they would sit for like an hour or 2 and they will talk. That streamer would, like, prepare for that podcast, and they would gather up questions and issues, and they would discuss things. Same goes to, like, EVE Online. They have, like, this EVE Fest or whatever, where they actually communicate problems, right? In CitizenCon, it's a nice show. It's just a nice show. No one is really, like, doing that communication. So I think CG overall is company that got too big too fast, and I think that's one of the reasons. And they have never produced, like, the only, like, good thing, like, finished game they have produced is a Hyper Vanguard Force.
Yeah,
that's a super great game, right?
It was made by one employee, by the way. One employee in his free time.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you just give person freedom and don't, like, do this.
Yeah, but you're 100% right on that. And I think the question, which is, who's in charge, that's not really the question that should be asked. The question is more, how are the managers at CIG adapting to the realities of the game as it exists?
Yeah, I just saw a comment in the chat which I think is pretty insightful. Which they're mentioning the
it worked on my company, working my PC.
The Squadron 42 demo, when he was like, well, it worked. Well, I know it works because it works on our computer our demo computer that we have back at the headquarters, right? Which is like maybe it does, but maybe that computer has different specs or different hardware or whatever. There's all sorts of little things that maybe you have this rig that's optimized for playing the game, but the general player, the general customer, isn't going to have that. And so you can't just negate when people say the game has issues or the game crashes by saying, oh, well, it worked on my thing back home.
Guys, you don't get it. In that presentation, everything was pre-recorded. Crashes were pre-recorded too, so it looks like it's a live gameplay, okay? It was all the part of the plan. Come on.
All right. All right. So we've got 2 more questions. The last one's going to take us a little bit longer, and I'm going to ask Bo on this one. For this first one. Northern Trooper asks, to you, what is more important for CIG and its reputation? Pyro and 4.0 or 1.0 release?
This year, Pyro and 4.0. There's been a hell of a lot of talk over the last several years just about Pyro, and they need to put up or shut up. So Pyro in 4.0 this year. As early as next spring, 1.0, obviously. Yeah. But right now, right here and now, 4.0, period on the end. They just gutted it. Of course it's going to be 4.0.
Yeah. Cutlet, what do you think is more important, Pyro and 4.0 or the 1.0 release? Like for CIG and its reputation.
Like for CIG or for their image?
For their image. I think he's asking for their image.
Definitely not 1.0. 1.0 was a marketing move just to show we know where we're going. That's where we're going, right? They never set a timeline for it. They never. It's just like, here you go, space station building, get more hype, buy more stuff, buy pioneers at the IAE, all that stuff. That was a pure marketing move to just hype people up for the sales. The real stuff for them is definitely 4.0 and their like face in front of their backers, because it was so long promised, it was so delayed. They understand they need to deliver it, even in a gutted way, as Bo pointed it out, because we need the server meshing running. We need to move from this dead point, and they understand if they will not deliver it ASAP, there's going to be a lot of frustration. So 4.0 is definitely the thing. 1.0 is just the direction.
Yeah. Astro?
Yeah, I agree with Bo and Cutlet. For right now, this year specifically, it's 4.0. They've been talking about Pyro for how many years now? CitizenCon 2021 was the all about Pyro
road to 4.0.
Yeah, it was the road to 4.0, and here we are 3 years later, and we still don't have 4.0. Last year they had functioning Pyro demos at CitizenCon with solar flares. And then they launched an online demo of Pyro with solar flares for like a week for anyone to play. And then a year later, over a year since that point, we still don't have it, and they've removed solar flares from the release. So and it was, it's just frustrating to feel like, what is the holdup? Why do we not have Pyro? And I know that they've been working on jump gates and stuff like that, but even server meshing, like they showed server meshing functional at CitizenCon last year, and maybe it wasn't in like a fully a state that was fully releasable, but the main issue is they have 4.0 and Pyro that they have been talking about for, and CitizenCon 2021 was not the first time they've promised Pyro. It's been years and
it's
years.
It's been around since 2019, honestly.
5-6 years that they're now holding on to it and saying, oh yeah, next year, and it's to the point where I think Pyro is a big contributor to this reputation of they say things and then they never do them. They just continually push them back and make excuses. And I understand that the excuse of needing server meshing is a good one, because it is a pretty vital part of how the game is actually going to function and allow persistence and all that good shit that we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
But like, but it's a big thing, and I think the two things that they need to do, first of all, they need Pyro, and the second is Squadron 42 to show that CIG can actually deliver on things that they promise, and not continue to make excuses and push the game back and back and back and back and back, and then sell you ships, and then nerf the ships, and then sell you a slightly more expensive version next year that does the same thing.
That's going to be forever, though. That's going to be forever. You're always going to see nerfs. CIG is going to come in and nerf everyone's baby. Your sacred cow is going to get slaughtered every single time, because that's how MMO's balance works. You're just going to lose it.
Someone took my phrase, it was pure marketing, too offensive. I excuse myself. Not excuse myself. I excuse me for that. It's just maybe I was a little bit rough, but yeah.
I understand what you were saying, Cutlet, and I agree.
You have to understand like what I mean,
yeah.
Right? Not what I say. I might get too harsh in my verbalization of my thoughts, but yeah.
What you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, which was that the 1.0 is more about the vision of where things are going, not necessarily about an actual physical release, because 1.0 is so far away, we don't know.
And vision is what gets them money.
Yeah.
And hence it is marketing. That's why I exactly phrased it like this. It's good to know where we're going. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, I get what you're saying. I to a degree agree with that idea that 1.0 is the goal, not the destination. And even CIG said 1.0 is not a end; it is the beginning. It's just when they're done. I don't like how the marketing spin, because calling it 1.0 is marketing. Like it's not really the 1.0 we all signed up for. It's just what they have. It's a minimum viable product sort of thing.
Yeah. 1.0 is one thing. 1.0 is no more wipes. And that's what everyone has to understand. That's the whole thing of 1.0. It's when we actually will start to play the game, and our actions will matter, and there will be no more wipe after months when you say like whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think 4.0 is more important, because as everyone's chat was saying, is server meshing. That's what's really important. It's not sexy.
It doesn't matter how it's gutted.
Yeah.
Main thing is server meshing.
It's not sexy. You're not going to see it. You're not going to be able to play server meshing, but server meshing is important. And it was the most important thing that CIG was developing, because it is the future of the entire game is built off of it. Everything is built off of it. And so the fact that it's coming out hopefully this year, that's all that ever mattered. And I know a lot of people say that's copium, but like literally I said that well before.
Of course.
I said this back in like August of this year, when I thought CIG was just going to just gut it and rip it out so they could reach 4.0 by CitizenCon. I said CIG always has the option to just say Pyro, server meshing, jump points. That's all that matters. Everything else is discardable. And that's what they did. They just said those three things that matter. Everything else is, we can do it another day. These are the three things we need to get right.
I don't think also people like realize how different 4.0 is going to be.
Yeah.
For almost all aspects of gameplay, because like if you listen to the whispers in the corridors, like so many stuff is going to change in 4.0 that is not still on Evo, including the economy, trading, like the pricings. It's crazy.
I mean, NPCs with rocket launchers, like
there will be so many things to explore for players and revisit and refresh in their heads. Even with the 4.0 being gutted, like it's crazy. Yeah. If you paid attention, guys, you know what's going on with pricing in 4.0. Like so many things will change. Like how about Colossus bomb for A2 costing 640K?
Yeah.
How about that? Right?
Yeah. Like
it will all matter, right?
Millions of new exciting bugs.
Yeah.
That's true.
Also, lots of pretty screenshots. You know, Star Citizen is not called Screenshot Simulator for no reason. It's going to be, you're going to get all sorts of new pretty screenshots. So, all right. So this is the last question. That wasn't even the last question. The last question I'm going to start with Bo on this one again, because Bo is I'll go Bo, then Astral, and then Cutlet, because
because I talk too much. I agree. Always pick me at the end. No, I'm not kidding. Like literally, Salty Mike never gets me to his shows, because if I'm on the call, no one else gets on the call. It's my problem.
You're here when I'm here,
Cutlet,
so you can talk when I'm not.
Cutlet that's the reason why we haven't gotten Squad 42, because Cutlet answered the call and he is holding the line. So
I'm holding the line still. Like I'm paying my bills and I'm holding the line, man.
But only because this is a question specifically about Eve. So I want to start with Bo and then go to Astral, who's less experienced with Eve, and Astral and myself, we're less experienced with Eve, and end with an expert. So start with an expert, end with an expert. So Bo, the question is from Chimpasta. After this year's CitizenCon, many people in the community were saying Star Citizen was turning into Eve 2.0. What are your thoughts regarding this? And is this a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing. Screw that. So here's the thing. Eve, when I played Eve, what I got into Eve with was cool spaceships. That's what got me to Star Citizen. What I really was hyped up for with Eve was walking in stations and walking in my ship. That's Star Citizen. If they do half of the crafting stuff, which I was deep into in Eve, that's Star Citizen again, I'd be happy. I would be ecstatic with that. And everyone talked about wanting Eve's crafting system to be more like Star Wars Galaxies. That's the weird ass stuff we're getting with Star Citizen. So yeah, no, I'm fine. That's perfect to me. That is the perfect game. I can die happy.
All right, I will go next and then go to Astral. There's nothing wrong with it being Eve 2.0. Eve is an incredibly successful game. It is still around. It has been around since 2005. It is 2003. Okay, so yeah, it's been around for 20 years. Most games barely have a fraction of that lifespan, and they have been around for 20 years still. And they made money last year. Like they had some like downstairs, but they've actually been in the black recently in terms of like their money making for a over 20-year-old game. That is like, wow, I think is the only game that I can think of, and maybe GTA are the only games that I can think of that have that sort of longevity. So to be called Eve 2.0 is an incredible compliment. And on top of that, I see it as Star Wars Galaxies and Eve mixed together, taking some of the more frustrating parts of Eve and taking them out and replacing a lot of the rougher edged parts with things like Star Wars Galaxies, elements from like survival craft gaming and from immersive sims. It's a hodgepodge. Calling it Eve 2.0 is a little bit simplistic, but I don't think it's necessarily wrong. But it is a good. But it's not a bad thing when people say that. So, Astral.
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul. I think that watching that presentation, seeing the different things that they were talking about with how, what they plan to do to MMOify Star Citizen, it definitely reminded me of Eve, but a lot of the things that they were talking about are things that they have changed that are different from Eve, that were Star Citizen does a lot of things that I was looking for in a space game that Eve didn't necessarily have. And I think that combining the clearly very successful MMO aspects from Eve, as well as the gameplay from Star Citizen, it could be a magic ticket to a very, very successful game that can last a very, very, very long time.
Yeah. No. And someone said it's reductionist. That was my kind of point. It's reductionist to call it, but I get the feeling for it. And whenever I hear people say it's Eve 2.0, it's never in a negative connotation. Anyone who says Eve 2.0 is like, this is what I wanted Eve to be, and that's what it means. Cutlet, is this Eve 2.0, and is it a good or a bad thing?
Well, I want to start with referencing the same letter from the chairman that I referenced before. about the insurance and all that. It's the same reference where Chris Roberts talked about the Souls games.
Yeah.
And he said he doesn't want
to make Eve.
To make an Eve
Yeah.
2.0. But he also didn't want to make crafting in a game, as it was pointed out.
Yeah.
Before. So guess what? I think Star Citizen will never become Eve 2.0. I don't think that might sound a bit rough, but I don't think CAG have balls big enough to make it an Eve 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
They will be afraid for certain aspects. Neither I think they should. What I think CAG should do though, because like whenever like Chris would say, "Oh, I played this, that," I don't expect Chris Roberts to play any of those games to an extent to understand what those games are about. He just wouldn't have time to do that. Let's be real. So I think when high-end developers talk about those games and their own feelings about those games, they don't really know what they're talking about. Like I don't want to offend anyone. It's like I don't talk about game development like coding because I don't do coding, right? So but I think CAG could definitely get inspired by the good things in Eve. That's how players interact with each other, how players depend on each other, how PvE and PvP players can exist in a synergy where they're dependent on each other. Obviously, there are a lot of haters to player-driven economy, and all they want is 9-to-1 ratio with NPCs to like play their little like straightforward game. I understand that those players will always be there, and I cannot blame them for being there. They probably have like 1 hour or 2 hours to play, because when you start playing these games more extensively, you understand the beauty of player-driven stories, player-driven economy, player-driven conflict dramas, and when the game actually make the news outside of the game world. And that Eve is a good example for that. It's crazy how like that's one of the very little games that even managed to do that, and that revolves all around player interactions, the consequences, and that creates this like unique game feeling that Eve has. So in that regard, I definitely want Star Citizen to be Eve 2.0. Eve definitely has its own flaws, right? And those flaws, I would love CG to dodge. It might be too punishing in certain aspects, and that CG can also manage. But all I can say, like, I wish it would be Eve 2.0 in a good way. That's all I can say. With all the good things that Eve brought to the online MMO gaming, like the uniqueness of what they did. They did a huge work. They have like the economy team actually running there to make that work, and that is possible even in Star Citizen. That would be great. But will CG ever be able to pull it out? It's only time will tell. How they will listen to people, how they think, what their plans are, we just don't know.
Yeah, I agree, and I do think it's also important to remember that Star Citizen has never ventured to be anything but Star Citizen, and it will never be anything but Star Citizen. So keep that in mind. And when you ever hear somebody comparing it to another game, I have heard Star Citizen be called Starkov before. I've heard it called, Elite with Legs. I've heard it called so many different names in the past, and they've all been true and all been false. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. We're going to end this here, though. If you're watching this live, I'm going to be playing the game a little bit more as well, because I wasn't able to do some combat missions in the Polaris, and I do want to have the experience that Cutlet had of dragging a body and throwing them into a brig and then feeding them crews through a little hole. So I'll be streaming a little bit later after this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you just have to come to join us on Twitch, twitch.tv/TheAstroPub. By the way, if you want to join us, where I do also stream, people get confused about this. I stream regular gameplay on YouTube and Twitch as well. So if you're watching this after the fact, come join us live. Make sure you check out Astral, Cutlet, and BoTalks on their social media platforms, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok as well. Would love to have you come on and watch us on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Or no, is it 5 p.m.? No, it's 4 p.m. 4 p.m.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Pacific. To join us live on these Captain Stables, and hit that subscribe button, like the video if you did enjoy this, comment down below your thoughts on any of the things we talked about. And like I always say, hope to see you someday in the black.